Let's get to our next guest because he was a key part of our program last year and he's been good enough to join us on the back of Hawthorn's first pre-season game, which they lost to Geelong in Geelong yesterday. Sam Mitchell's his name. Mitch, thanks for joining us again.
Yes, thanks for having me on again, boys.
Oh, back into it, and it was not a reality check because you would have known what you were getting yourself up against yesterday, but how have you dissected it only a few hours on from what happened?
Yeah, it was reasonably difficult one to watch, Kane. It was, they're a good side, and I was just so hoping that this would be the year that they'd finally fall off the cliff. But I don't think there's any risk of that, unfortunately. We have to put up with Geelong up the top again. But no, they look strong, and we couldn't handle some of the things that they did as well as I would have liked. And we win or we learn, and a fair bit of learning out of last night's performance.
So, do you walk away daunted by the prospect of trying to be as good as them and to get to where they are at?
No, I'm not daunted. I think I looked at, you look at the centre square at different instances, and what I try to do is think, okay, if we pause them where they are now and we add 2 or 3 seasons into all of our players, and then we compete against them, it gives you a bit of faith that you look at Newcombe lines up on Guthrie, and you think, okay, if we just pause Guthrie where he is and we add another 3 years and 60 games into Newcombe, I think they're reasonably comparable, and you feel a bit more positive about it. Whereas right now, obviously, someone like Cam Guthrie is, got a few more strings to his bow and can get away with a few more things than our young fellas. But I think they're a very good side. Been playing together for a long time, and they're going to continue to be strong.
So as coach, Mitch, you bounced out of bed this morning. Are you concerned at all or not? Is it? I just see the size of the margin, and I know they're the best in the comp. They're the best the AFL have right now, but they had a lot of stars on the sidelines as well. They're only going to get better from there. Do you get concerned with the performance and a smacking of where you're actually at?
No, not concerned. I had a really good chat with Luke Bruce, driving back down the highway last night, and he, the old "it's never as good or as bad as it seems" is very, very obvious on a night like last night. Once I got home and watched a bit of the Vision last night, and there were certainly some areas that need some sharpening, but overall, there was a few more positives than perhaps I thought as soon as we were there. But their consistency of the way that they play was much better than what we had, and I think this time last year we got absolutely blown away by Collingwood in the first practice game, and it was a bit of more of a reality check. Whereas I think this time around, playing on their home deck that they train at every day, different dimension ground that we haven't played at before. We tried a few different things in our mix. We certainly wanted to explore some options with our game style, which we did, and then we'll see which ones of those hold up and which ones we need to shelve.
So in terms of the system and how you want to play, were you happy with what you saw? I know some things broke down, and that's going to happen with young teams, but through the pre-season you've been drilling a system, a style of play into this group. Did you get what you want out of that last night?
Oh, not as often as I would have liked. Certainly at different stages there was some passages of play that were better for us and that looked a bit more like the way we had trained. But even talking to the players after the game, we train against each other, and both teams are really trying to do the same thing all the time. And you play against another team that have a different model and a different game style, that everyone isn't where you think they'd be. So our players need to get used to playing against real opposition, and that was the first time we've done it for since August of last year. So we weren't all that surprised at the level that they were at, but what we perhaps were a bit disappointed with was how consistent we were with doing the things that we've shown that we have been able to do across the pre-season.
So what happens now? How do you give us an insight into how you digest the review, your messages to the players, and how you balance it between your obvious disappointment, because we can hear that in your voice, versus walking away giving them some of the positive that you saw?
Yeah, I got, that's probably, I don't know if any of the players would be listening to you. They're probably still trying to get out of bed after the late night. But the thing that I found really obvious is you saw the same player do something that's so unlike them, but then 5 minutes later they do the thing that you would expect. And so the level of consistency that we saw, and there was an example that I can think of off the top of my head was, Will Day's in a really good position on the ground, and he runs himself out of position by trying too hard, basically. But then 5 minutes later, he's in nearly identical position, and the ball ends up falling to him, and he is able to get involved in the play. And you look at the difference between those two bits of play, and if you put those all together, they add up. Some of our forwards are pointing to one direction, and our midfielders or defenders are kicking it to them in a different. And just so we're just not all on the same page often enough. And I think that's when you play a team like Geelong that have played a very similar brand for a long period of time, that connection that they have on the field was something that we've got to work towards.
How young is too young is going to be the talking point all year with the Hawks. Have you got enough senior core players in there to steer the ship? And in terms of looking for round one, we're not worried about the pre-season competition. As you said, it can throw up numbers that you're not used to and can be quite... it can skew the facts, put it that way. Have you got enough senior core bodies in there to show the way round one and beyond?
Well, time will tell, Kingy. I think I'm really confident in the group that we've put together. I think James Sicily has grown enormously, and I think he's going to do a really good job as a captain of a footy club. He hasn't done that before, and our group of leaders around him haven't been in that position before, so they're going to take some time to do some learning. But I think you add Luke Bruce sat with us in the coach's box along with Mitch Lewis and Chankloth Jaff yesterday, and I think when I look at those three players, all quite important, quite loud, really good game understanding, that's three players that you add in. I think we do have a bit stronger leadership than we showed yesterday. I was, to be honest, a bit disappointed with the spirit in the group at a couple of stages. We did manage to get it back, but I think the Geelong juggernaut got on top of us for probably a 5-minute patch in the second quarter, which was disappointing, but it's a good thing to review, and I'm glad it happened in the pre-season rather than in the main season.
Now, I know you're trying to fast-track this rebuild and there's no timeline necessarily set on it, but we watched the show last night, Show Me the Money 2, and there are a lot of deals spoken about behind the scenes, and Hawthorn was mentioned in most of them. Clearly, you'd be disappointed to not have attained some of that talent. How many deals would have fallen by the wayside, both in and out of Hawthorn, to attracting players and getting deals done and trades done to shift players for better picks? How many deals would you have been involved with, a ballpark figure that didn't realise themselves?
It's a great question. A lot would be the answer. I mean, Mark McKenzie and his recruiting and list management team really deal with the vast majority of that. Some of it, when it gets closer to the pointy end, I'll get involved in, but really let the bakers bake, and those guys do an enormous amount of work. I mean, right now, he sent me a text late last night saying, just keep this in mind for next week. We might be having a chat with this player, et cetera, et cetera. So there's always something happening with those guys, and I feel a bit better about it this year because last year we had an enormous amount of deals fall away with no outcomes. This year, at least, we had some outcomes. We brought in Lloyd Meek, Carl Amon and Cooper Stevens. Two of those guys played yesterday. Cooper obviously had a concussion, so he couldn't play, but those other two lads, along with Fergus Green, all have added something to the group. So all that work that they put in all year, at least we get some benefit from it now.
And that was a follow-up I had to that because there's a scene where D'Orazio tells McKenzie that Bose has chosen Geelong, and he's like, you guys couldn't have done anything more. The money was good, the pitch, I think you took him out for lunch, the pitch couldn't have been any better.
Lunch? Where'd you go?
But the thing that you couldn't change was where you're at, Mitch. And that's difficult to attract players. And no doubt you would have factored that in, but is that frustrating for you?
Not really. When I think about our list management strategy, what we want to achieve is build our own internal premiership group, which we can then add to. I think if you're getting players in that are going to be your core, that makes it more difficult. You obviously pay a premium for any players that are coming from another club. So what I'm really proud of, as far as our group of formal leaders for this year, most of them are homegrown. So Sam Frost and Jarman Impey have both come from other clubs, but Bruce and Sicily and Moore and Mitchell Lewis, they're all Hawthorn drafted, Hawthorn developed, Hawthorn recruited. So that gives me faith that our models around how we're developing our players and our leadership is improving. And I think that what we need to be able to achieve is we need to get to a position where we've made a premiership core group, and then players will start thinking, okay, I want a part of this, and then they can come and fill the gaps that we have, which we've seen a couple of times, but really in another 2 years' time is when the free agency market would be much more a priority rather than the draft.
Where did you take him for lunch, and will you revisit that restaurant with your next drive to acquire?
I actually didn't take him out for lunch, so I think there might be a bit of sugar on that story. I did catch up with him, but I didn't take him out for lunch, so I won't give you too much. I haven't seen the show. No, I haven't seen the show. I haven't seen it yet, so interesting that they give away that much information. Usually, Hawthorn are well renowned for keeping things under the hat, so I'm not sure that I'll be giving you too much about things like that, boys.
Well, in a couple of weeks, we want to back over this again, so make sure you've watched the show, and we want to work out what was fact and what was fiction.
Yeah, well, I did spend some time with him and definitely tried to get him over. I thought he was pretty impressive in the early part of the game. I think he only played the first 2 quarters last night, but I was just as disappointed leaving the game thinking that we missed him than as I was when we got the phone call to say that he'd chosen Geelong.
Mitch, appreciate you fronting up for us, mate. We'll speak to you throughout the year, hopefully once again. It was terrific last year, so don't enjoy the review, but get stuck in the review and we'll check in with you in a couple of weeks.
All right, thanks, guys. Enjoy the show.
On you, mate.
Sam Mitchell. So Hawthorn play Collingwood next Thursday, 5:10 in Tassie before their round 1 game Sunday, March the 19th against Essendon at the MCG, and that will be a big one.